You are all set.
Thank you. Hello. Hello, good morning. My name is Daphne Jean. I am a development consultant. I am an independent consultant. I founded SMJ Consulting about 3 years ago. And as the founder and also principal consultant, I work with various type of nonprofit organization to help them get funding from mainly private foundations, but I also secure funds from government agencies as well. Lastly, but not least, I also help nonprofit organization fundraise from individual donors. Today, I will be presenting on how to write a grant application. We will focus on the 7 core components to make your grant application compelling and competitive. We will focus on the core content for each component. Um, and what else will we focus on today? Um, I will also discuss some additional grant requirements that funders may request for grant application. Okay. So these are some brief information about me. I have been a development professional for the past 9 years. I have helped raise $22 million for nonprofit organization and also work on a fundraising portfolio that helped brought $10 million from individuals within 5 years. I've worked with more than 10 nonprofit organizations within the span of the past 9 years. I love fundraising because it's an opportunity to really engage people in the work that you're doing, whether there are individual donors or funders. All right, so if you are working on a grant application, you want to make sure that you provide funders with the following content. The first one is an overview of your organization. You want to clearly state the problem that your organization is addressing. You want to you want to persuasively describe a target population. You want to detail your goals and objectives. You also want to have an implementation plan. You want to have some sort of evaluation means to actually measure progress. And last but not least, you also want to have a budget. Those are what I call the core components of a grant application. When you provide all of these information, you help build credibility with funders. You also help funders understand how their funds will be used effectively and impactfully. All right, so for the first part of a grant application, you will typically get a couple of questions asking about your organization. For this section, it's really your opportunity to tell funder your history, your mission, and your past accomplishment. You can also use this section to actually differentiate yourself um, and other organization. As I present, I will also share specific examples of statement that may be included in the core sections of a grant application. So this is an example of how to describe how to provide an overview of your organization. Um, Care Crew uniquely assists DC homeless individuals by meeting them whether they are sheltering in parks or living near professional offices. We were founded in 2024, and since our beginning, we have assisted 100 homeless person with sanitation products, nutritious food, and mental health counseling. So this is a good overview because it directly tell the funder which issue you are addressing. You are addressing homelessness. How are you addressing it? You are addressing it by helping individuals who are um, living in the street, um, either in parks or living in professional offices. You also share some of your impact over the years. You have helped 100 homeless person. This is very specific. It's not general. It get the reader of your grant application to truly see that you are making a difference in your community. In most grant application, funders will ask you about about the history of your organization through different questions, and these are just certain examples. All of them focus on either you sharing your history, sharing your mission, and also sharing your key accomplishment. Sometimes, funder may also explicitly ask you about your board of directors. Um, Whether they ask you explicitly or not, it is a good idea to tell funders the role of your boards within your organization. Legally, your board of directors is responsible for your organization governance. But more than governance, they also have a critical role in helping you raise money. An organization that have a strong board that actively provide their due diligence and also raise money for the organization they serve do get um, more points in their grant application. It helps the funder know that you have a set of members that will ensure that money is being used um, according to the law. And also, there is a group of people who are experts at helping your organization succeed. The problem statement. In all grant application, your success will depend on how well you describe the problem you are addressing. Funders do not want to fund nonprofit organizations because they need money. They want to fund organization because they are actually addressing a problem. But more importantly, the problem you described in your grant application must be solvable. It cannot be a problem with no solution. Another important thing when describing the issue you work on is to make sure that you use data. You want to validate your statement. You just don't want to say there is a problem of poverty and it affects women and men. You want to use data to really help the funder understand. Oftentimes, nonprofit organization in their communication just focus on what they offer. Maybe they offer sanitation products. That's good, but you want to really take your problem statement as a way to build anticipation of helping a funder understand why your solution matter. Do not assume people, whether funders or lay individual, understand the issue you are addressing. This is really your opportunity to engage and persuade people to take on the role of a problem solver. Donors become problem solvers when they donate to you. Funders become problem solvers when they provide a grant award. One way we can describe the problem of homelessness in the District of Columbia, connecting to the first example that I shared, is to give a brief example of what homelessness looks like. So this example really focused on the type of individuals who are homeless. On any given night in the District of Columbia, there are 3,960 single individuals and 1,656 adults and children in 539 family households who are experiencing homelessness. You also want to make sure that you getting data from reputable sources. These can be government sources. These can also be from research institution that conduct research about your issue area. Uh, to make this example more compelling, the organization can also include an emotional appeal. It may wish to talk about the difficulties experienced by the homeless population, such as describing their incidents of hunger, their inability to sleep, or even highlighting the experience of violence. But again, when you are writing your problem statement, you want to make sure you are connecting it to whatever solution that your organization is proposing in the grant application. So, for example, if your organization is not addressing violence, then you don't want to necessarily talk a lot about violence in the problem statement. So this problem statement is mainly focusing on the fact that this home for people who are homeless, they don't necessarily have secure housing. And part of the solution for this organization, they want to help those individuals have access to housing. So what are the common questions you might see in grant application trying to get you to talk about your problem statement? A funder might ask you to briefly describe the identified need in the community that the program will be addressing. They may ask you, what is the purpose of your grant request? They may also ask you to describe the need your organization meets in the community. Now, as you may have seen in the previous example, we also talk about the individuals who are experiencing the problem that your organization may be working on. Closely related to a problem statement is also talking about the people you are assisting. Now, in some grant application, they may have questions that specify the applicant to talk about a problem. And sometimes there may be questions that explicitly ask the organization to describe its target population. This is needed because the funder wants to know who they are helping. They also want to understand the unique needs of those population. Again, those are all connected to the proposed solution of the grant application. They want to be able to assess whatever solution that you are requesting money for it makes sense for the problem that you are addressing, and it also makes sense for the people you are working with. So this is the opportunity where you may actually share data about the population. You may also share the characteristic of those you are helping. So you can, for the organization that is featured in these examples, their focus is the homeless population in DC. So we focus on describing the different type of people who are experiencing homelessness in DC. So we talk about the unsheltered people. We talk about people who are in emergency shelters. We also talk about people who are living in transitional housing facilities. And these are some common questions, really focusing on funders understanding the target population you are assisting. All right. So another section in most grant application is to better understand your organization's goals and objective. This is where you get to persuade the funder that you have clear goals to achieve within the funding requests. And not only do you have goals, you have also taken the time to think through objectives that will allow you to measure success during the grant period. Um, I would say as a grant professional, some of the most critical part of a grant application is the problem statement and the goals and objectives sections. These really help funders understand how their funding will be used and also help them to assess if you are the right applicant to fund. Most funders give money because they are addressing specific issues. So for the example of homelessness in DC, if a funder is not interested in funding the homeless population and you are actually writing about women's rights, or maybe you are writing an application about climate change, it's going to be very easy for the funder to understand that this is not the right applicant for us. It doesn't mean like what you're working on is not important. It doesn't mean that the work you do is not effective. They're just not in alignment between your work and the interest of the funding opportunity. So in this section, you want to have clear goals. They don't have to be complex, convoluted. It can be as easy as we are working to reduce homelessness and explaining how. So Care Crew will reduce the number of individuals and families experiencing homelessness in the District of Columbia, ensuring that every person has access to safe and stable housing. So the focus of this applicant request is to help house the homeless population. It's very clear what they're working on. And they have also used SMART objective to describe how they plan to assess their progress and also how they plan to measure their goals. So, one of the SMART objective use is to decrease the number of unsheltered persons in the District of Columbia by 25% from 900 to 675 within the next 12 months through targeted outreach, rapid rehousing initiatives, and increased access to emergency shelters. So this objective worked well because um, it gives measures to assess progress, but it also gives a timeline. These are also common funder questions, really targeting at understanding an applicant goals and objective. As you will see further in this presentation, your goals and objective are also closely related to your evaluation. All right, so now you have already helped the funder understand your goals and how you will measure progress during the grant application. You also want to help funder understand what is your implementation plan. Now, some of you guys may be thinking, this is a lot of work. Why do we have to share so much information with a funder? Why can't we just tell them about our goals and then they give us funding? Your major goal as you write a grant application is to help people understand your goals, but also how you plan to succeed. And the implementation plan doesn't leave funders with just ideas only, but they also want to know that your goals are operational. And that is the goal of the implementation plan. So for the implementation plan, you really want to action the activities that you plan to take. You also want to share the timeline. So maybe you are requesting funding for 12 months. What is going to happen the first month that you get the funding? What about during the 6 months? So sometime when I write grant application, depending on the funder, I may provide a monthly timeline, but for some, providing them a timeline based on quarterly activities is enough. In your implementation plan, you also want to elevate the people who will be responsible for carrying out this work. When you share um, when you share information about your project team, you want to elevate their experience. You want to help the funder understand that this person is qualified for their role in this project. So in this example, since we are working with a population that is experiencing homelessness, you want to elevate people on your team who has experience working with homelessness. You want to state how many years of experience they have. Do they have any type of certification? Definitely elevate all of those information. Your grant application is an opportunity to persuade people your your organization is the right one to receive funding to help the funder achieve their funding priorities. And these are common questions you will see in grant application targeting your organization plan to implement your request for funding. All right. So earlier I had mentioned that your goals and objective section is closely related to your evaluation plan. Now, I have worked with enough organization to know whenever we talk about evaluation, most people think that their organization is now ready to have a M&L person, somebody to monitor and evaluate their program's effectiveness. Evaluation does not mean having an M&L individual, expert, specialist within your organization to do that. It just means that you have the awareness that you are receiving funding to carry out a specific type of project. And because you are a credible organization, you are thinking about success. So the evaluation section is really your ability to help funder understand that you do plan to use the SMART objective that you have listed to actually measure progress during the grant period. So, for this, for the example of this organization, their action is that they wanted to establish a monitoring and evaluation framework to track the number of unsheltered persons monthly, assess the effectiveness of intervention, and make data-driven adjustment. Um, So for this evaluation plan, it works well, but as I say, you don't need to have an M&E framework. It can be as much as sharing with a funder, like as we work on this initiative, we plan to survey our participants to get feedback from them. We also plan to track the number of individuals that we are assisting, and um, we plan to understand the effectiveness of a program. And you, of course, you have to translate those into the type of work that you do. So for this organization, they can A, measure the number of people that they do serve, but they also may want to understand, like, okay, are we providing like mental health support to these individuals? How did it help them, and how did it help them in our objective for this grant request, and what could have been done better? Um, you don't have to, you don't the evaluation process should be all about learning what is working and what is not working. And you should be open to sharing the learning process with the funder, because it may be useful for not only your organization, but also people working on the same issue as you. In 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 the US, it's very common that major funders will have specific grant making priorities. Some of those may include ensuring that youth who are leaving the foster care system have pathway to be successful. It may also be assisting women to open more businesses. Um, so for all of those issue areas, these funders are also looking to understand what works and what does not work. So when you do have an evaluation plan, it helps funder know you're not just implementing a project, you are also committed to understand what works and doesn't work. So in the future, the work can be implemented better. These are some common questions that you will see in grant applications, focusing in understanding how your organization will make sure that it creates some type of framework to capture learning during the grant period. All right, so now the final core information that funders want to know is understanding how money will be expended. Um, it it becomes a lot easier for an organization to be successful in its grant seeking by creating specific budget to understand what the organization need funding for. Sometimes I do talk to organization, they're strictly focused on their mission. Your mission is a guiding light to how you can create initiatives, projects, programs to actually advance whatever issue area you are working on. Most organizations need to take the time to actually figure out how much money is required for them to actually implement initiatives. When you don't have a budget, it becomes extremely difficult to ask funders for money because your requests become a pie in the sky. You want all of the things, but you don't even really understand why you need those information. Having a clear budget, tell funders how grant funds will be expended. It also help you be transparent with the expenses needed to achieve your goals and objective. Do not ask funders for more money than you need. If the project requires $50,000, don't ask them for $60,000. The purpose of grant funding is to expend money to implement a project or a program. This is an example of what can be a budget narrative in a grant application. As you will see, we specified the different line items where funding will go towards. We talk about the personnel, those responsible for actually implementing the work and their role in the project. We talk about like outreach and engagement. We also talk about housing assistance that may be needed to help this population. We also budgeted for emergency shelter support and improvement. And for this client, they also created a line item for monitoring and evaluation. The most important part about your budget is that the expenses must be justified. And the way that this client did it is really to highlight that this budget is designed to ensure that Care Crew can effectively implement its strategies to reduce homelessness in the District of Columbia. Each line item has been carefully considered to support the project goals with strong focus on personnel, outreach, housing support, and ongoing evaluation. Okay, these are some common questions where funders want to better understand how money will be used. Please explain how grant expenses align with program activities and program outcomes. What is the total cost of the proposed project? What other funding sources are supporting this project, if any? So we have talked about the seven core components of a grant application. Oftentimes, a grant application will also require additional documents. They may ask for a logic model. A logic model is a graphic representation of your theory of change. And the theory of change basically is how do you plan to achieve the change that you desire in the world? So a logic model will include input, it will include output, it will detail outcomes, and also share the broader impact that your organization wishes to have. You may be asked to share resumes of staff. You may be asked to share job description of the team members that are needed for the project or program. You may be asked to submit letters of support. And funders may also ask you to help them understand the revenue source of your organizations. Um, so this presentation was created to help your organization understand the type of content that is needed for a grant application. As as you can recall from the examples, they were very brief. They were not representative of actual answers in a grant application, but they were focusing on demonstrating how you can share information. I would say for most grant application, you have about anywhere from a paragraph to 3 paragraphs to answer questions. Sometimes you may even have as much space as 5 paragraphs to answer question. But the key idea is that as you are seeking grant funding for your organization, you will be applying for different grant application, and most grant application will be asking for those seven core information we have discussed. They will ask them in different question, but if you become familiar with why they are asking you this question, you then have an advantage to actually create very compelling and competitive grant application going forward. Um, okay, this concludes the presentation. Um, If anybody is interested in reaching out to me, these are my contact information. I am active on LinkedIn. You can find me by searching for Daphney Jean. You can also email me at daphne@smjgrantconsulting.com. I also have a website that you can also use to learn more about my consulting firm. All right, I hope this presentation was helpful. And as I said, if you have any question, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne.
All right.
And I will speak to you offline.
All right, thank you. And I'll also send you the presentation as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.